It appears that we have a quorum, so the this meeting of the Waterfront Advisory Committee order, stand on it. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk,
I haven't heard otherwise, sir.
The agenda for this meeting has been previously distributed. Are there any comments back to that? Any suggestions or changes to the agenda? Not, is there a motion to approve? Second. All in favor? All right, let's move to the minutes from the April 13th meeting, which have previously been distributed. Any comments to be made with respect to those minutes? If there are no comments, is there a motion to approve the minutes from the April 13th?
Motion to approve the minutes as they are of April 13th.
30 seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Move to the first discussion item.
Abstain.
All right. You got it.
Okay.
Move to the first discussion item, but before getting there, I'd like to make this statement. I'm going to do things a little differently. Back to this item. It might be usual. Barna will make his presentation, following which members of this committee will have a chance to question him and make comments. And following that, we will open up the meeting for comments and questions from anyone in the audience, including anyone who is out there. But I would request, please keep the comments and questions remain to the issues which the Barna is presenting. So, Barna.
Good evening. So we're here to talk about the public feedback that we got for the Waterfront Park Relieving Platform project. So if you can go ahead on to the next slide over. There's our team there. They all helped out for this. Go to the next slide. So as you know, for the last several months, we developed the options, some potential options for the relieving platform. We started out with about 8, then we called it down to about 4 of the most feasible options. And then using the input that we got from the Waterfront Advisory Committee poll, we graphically made those display boards, and then we engaged the public with them, and then we got their feedback. Many of you were at the public meeting. I remember seeing you there. And so just a recap of the options. Option 1 is repair. Is there any way to do a repair as discussed in here and at that meeting? Repair is not really that feasible of an option. It's possible, but it's likely would cost more than just rebuilding the facility if you can figure out a way to do it. Option 2 is rebuild what we have, but let's bring it up a little bit higher. Option 3 was fill it in with the seawall, and option 4 was essentially either option 2 or 3 with just expanded amenity options, a hybrid solution, whether we wanted more floating docks or more fixed piers or whatever out there. So if you go to the next slide over, that's just a review of the options. So prior to having the public meeting, as I said, we took the polling information from the Waterfront Advisory Committee's poll that was last winter, late last fall, early winter, something like that. We took that and using that information was what the illustrators actually, it took that commentary to generate the board. So that was the first time we used public feedback in this process. The second time, we did it was at the public meeting where we estimate there was around 150 attendees. We didn't take roll call or count anybody, but that's just kind of what it looked like to most of us. Around 150 people showed up. Of that, we got 49 opinions from the physical comment cards. So that was the front and back paper comment cards that we handed out, and we asked people to make a comment. I believe we actually had a few more cards than that. Not all of it was what option do you like? Option 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those were your options. Some people put something other than option 1, 2, 3, or 4. So we couldn't, put that in a nice little categorized box, but whatever opinion they had was recorded nonetheless. So we received 49 comment cards. We also had the stickers. So at the public meeting, we had the display boards, options 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we also told the public that they could take some green stickers or some red stickers and just stick them on aspects that you really like or you really dislike or otherwise. And so we had 191 stickers that we counted throughout those boards. And then what we did is we looked at the boards, we took pictures of all of them, and then we went through and we said, okay, well, what are these stickers pointing to? And sometimes the stickers were clearly pointing to a different element, the railing, or it was a red sticker on the fixed pier. It was really, really clear that it was what the comment was about. It wasn't always, sometimes it was a little ambiguous on, okay, what's the green sticker really referencing here? So we did the best we could there. Nevertheless, it was a good gauge. You could physically see, you could actually see on the board where the commentary was going just based on the sticker placement. So that was some good gouge there. And then online feedback. So there was a total of 25 opinions received as of Thursday when we received all the data from the city, which was very similar to the other comment cards, the other questions that had been asked. So all the questions were very similar or the same. So if you go to the next slide. So what we did is we took all those data sets, not the initial waterfront advisory survey, but the 3 data sets that we had from the public meeting, the sticker boards, the comment cards, and the website, added all those up, went through and looked at where people selected, what options they selected the most, and then what other additional commentary they had off to the side. So option 1, which was the repair option, that was minimal support, 3 selections there. Option 2, that had the most support. That was just the rebuild what you have and replace it option, rebuild it a little bit higher. Option 3 is the fill it in option. The second highest option is option 4, which is a hybrid, which essentially is, okay, take option 2 and just add more amenities to it would be a good way to look at option 4. It's another way to look at kind of how option 4 was presented, showed additional boat docking, additional boardwalks, splash pad, just some other ideas to get the public's creative juices flowing, as it were. So, essentially option 4 is a more is better scenario. So I think that's really why that came in at the second highest ranking, just because option 4 had more amenities associated with it. So option 2, rebuild what we have and raise it up slightly higher than it is now, so it doesn't flood, was the clear choice based on those selections and all the comments received. Some of the limitations that we had was on the comment cards and stickers. So like I said, with the comment cards, it wasn't always, somebody didn't always select option 2. They might have said, well, I like this, and it wasn't option 1, 2, 3, or 4. So we couldn't really get a clear indication of what option they wanted to select. Another one was the stickers. My guys saw multiple people putting multiple red stickers on stuff they didn't like. So there could be some repeat voting going on with some of the sticker method. And then from the online survey, I was a little surprised we only had 25 responses, because the internet's a really good avenue for people to respond through because you don't have to look anybody in the eye or, really do a whole lot of effort. But there's only 25 responses there, and then only 6 of those had actually been to the public meeting. So it would have been nice to maybe see a little more online action than we got. But overall, I would say, as far as engaging the public, I was talking to the guys earlier, other than coming up with our own YouTube channel or podcast about the relieving platform, I don't know how much more public engagement we could really do at this point. It's not like we're not taking any more public comments at this point, right? We'll continue to do that throughout the process. It's just, this is what we've been able to get so far. So if you go to the next slide over, these really come up with the additional comments. All of the comment cards had a section to just additional comments that you would like to discuss.
Maybe step to the side so we can see.
Yes, I'm sorry there. So one of the things was the shade, more shade, more swings. That is some of that may have been from my cueing. I said, hey, if you like the swings, make sure you make a comment on it. Some of it, I think people just really like the swings. They just really like the shade out there. There were some concerns about the cruise ships overdevelopment, splash pad, in that, hey, if we go with the hybrid option, would we be changing the character of the waterfront park from something that it's not? Just as a side note, any of those other amenities could be phased in if Beaufortonians want in the future, and if we have the funds. Accessibility, that's another big one, making sure that everybody can access it and it's safe. Maintenance concerns, there were a few concerns over that. How do we guarantee that we're not that our children or grandchildren aren't in the same position 50 years from now? That's really more of the engineering side of things to make sure that we get a good, resilient product. And then cost was really honestly not mentioned that much. Surprisingly, I added cost. I added this bullet that did not come from the data, and I'm telling you why I added that in there is because I know it will be important at some point. That was just not we didn't outwardly project a bunch of words dealing with the cost of the project. We weren't there to really solicit their opinions about the cost of the project. It was more to find out what Beaufortonians want out of the project. So cost wasn't really mentioned, but it will be a factor in public commentary. It always is. Even though it did not show up in the data, I guarantee it's relevant. So next slide, I think might be one more. So this is just a little bit more of the breakdown of some of the other additional items that we discussed. So we went in, we counted the splash pad. There was quite a few people that had mentioned that. 14 people liked a splash pad, 4 opposed it. Cruise ships, I was really surprised. It was almost evenly divided with a 4-6 split. There were quite a few recommendations that said there's not enough information. I think there were people out there that could tell there was either I hate it or I love it, but there was no, that was it. There was nothing backing up the I hate it or I love it opinion on the cruise ships. So I read a couple of them myself that just said this should be studied more. The impact on cruise ships should be studied before you make the yay or no call. And that would be up to you guys to do. But I was a little surprised there. The boardwalk, that was part of the expanded amenity for a hybrid option, doing more, getting people closer to the water, lower down to the water, out into the water type of thing. There was about twice as many people opposed it as didn't, but I was actually surprised that there was a fair amount of people that were also in favor of it. So it was a 26-39 disfavor on that. The day dock, I was even surprised a little bit more. There was almost equal opposition as there was people who like the day dock. So that just kind of shows a cross section of, these are just some of the additional items that people mentioned out of those 190 comments. These were the 1, 2, 3, 4 things that popped up with enough regularity that we were able to get some quantification out of them and bring that back here to you guys. If you go to the next slide, I think that might be the last one. It is. So the takeaway that I got out of it by looking at the data and looking at and just being present at the public meeting is Beaufortonians want back what they have. That would be happy. And I think we kind of knew that from the beginning. It sounds like they like the aesthetic of what's there, the use of what's there. They like the idea of raising it so we don't get those sunny day flooding issues. And they seem to show overwhelming support for option 2, which is really one of the options that I've personally been, leaning against in this alternatives analysis, because I think at the end of it, it's going to prove that option 2 is.
Excuse me, Bill, you said leaning against, you mean leaning against?
Leaning towards it, sorry.
Okay, that's a different-
Yeah, sorry. I've been kind of leaning towards option 2, just from my personal, just my personal thoughts, even though we haven't quite finalized the alternatives analysis yet. Part of what we need to do to finalize our alternatives analysis and phase 2 would be to take all the public comments into consideration. So where we'll go from here is we will finalize our alternatives analysis on the 5 options that we presented the city. One of them was the do nothing option. We all decided early on that the do nothing option doesn't satisfy the project goal, which is to bring the park back. So the plan is to come up with the closeout document that summarizes all the work to date and recommends the preferred alternative to the city. And what we're intending to do with that is a matrix that has all of the options and has all of the criteria that we have been looking at and discussing with you guys since we started this project: the permit ramifications, cost, schedule, longevity, resilience, public feedback, and all that. We're going to take all that data, put all that together and rank that criteria, and that will be the basis of our recommendation to the city. That's, we're hoping to have that at the very beginning of June, finalize that, give that recommendation to the city, and then the city, it's my understanding the city's going to take that recommendation and go out for RFP and select a engineering firm to design and permit it.
Bill, I've got it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Good to go.
Good.
Ask away.
uh,
I think that's the last slide.
Couple of questions. First of all, back to the critical line. Several months ago, I heard from somebody, I don't remember who it was, somebody on this committee, somebody on the staff, I don't know. Heard from somebody that the state had approved the critical line at the perimeter, the outside perimeter of the relief bank. But it was not in writing. We now heard from you at our last meeting that the state has designated the critical line at the old seawall. We have that in writing yet.
We have all of it in writing. The first, so when the critical line was certified in 2015 for the Day Dock project, they certified it at the face of the wall. And the DHEC personnel, the gentleman who certified that line at that time, is no longer alive. He mistakenly certified it there because for the longest time, everybody thought that that relieving platform was a seawall all the way out to the face of the seawall. When it was surveyed for this project by Davis and Floyd as a member of our team, it was surveyed correctly. So it was surveyed incorrectly last time and it was certified. It was surveyed correctly this time and it was certified. Our team went back to BCM, DHEC, and said, hey, look, you placed it at the seawall last time, or at the face of the structure last time. Can we get you to place it at the face of the structure this time? And so we went on to the head, we went to the top. And the reply was that there is still water that flows under that pier. Even though it is shoaling in, there's still water that flows under there. And so technically under the relieving platform is still designated as state resource. So it was incorrectly certified about 12 years ago, 11 years ago. And now we're on the correct region, the correct one.
Is there an official state certification
Yes.
at this point?
Yes.
That designates it at the old seawall?
No, because that was overwritten by the new critical area survey.
So where's the critical line now?
The critical line is actually at the old seawall. So it's, this is the actual seawall at the marina, but let's just pretend that this picture is the relieving platform. It was certified way out here in 2015. That's incorrect. Because at the relieving platform, water flows under all this 36 feet back. Okay, so that's why the critical line, and we tried to convince them because we said, look, there's 6 feet of fill, concrete, and then oak trees growing directly on top of what you're saying is state wetland. There's like a 20-inch, this 20-inch oak tree is growing. So, but they wouldn't bend. We tried.
What do we have from the state? I know I'm asking the same question repeatedly.
Certified critical area plat.
And that contradicts or corrects the 15-year-old.
Correct.
certification.
Right.
There's no question that is an official, that is the official statement.
Correct. That is correct. The other thing is too, is that critical lines change. In this situation, this critical line doesn't change because it's based on a concrete structure. And as long as the concrete structure stays there, that critical line won't change. But everywhere else, the state recognizes that critical lines are dynamic. They change daily or yearly or weekly. And so they have the ability to reset that line anytime that they want to. But yes, Steve and I went down that path. We both went to Blair at BCM and tried to sway them because, like I said, if you go down here on this corner, that tree and all the people standing around that tree are technically in state wetland, even though they're high and dry, and it doesn't really make any sense. They recognized that it was non-standard, but they still said their hands were tied.
Second question I have is, assuming that the city elects to go with the, I guess it's option 2 at this point, build and raise. I think you made reference at our last meeting to the fact that the work would include some work for reinforcing the old seawall. Could you either confirm that or deny it or comment on it?
I mean, we're probably gonna have to replace that old seawall. I would assume that that's up to the designer, whatever the designer figures out to do with that seawall. It's kind of a liability to go through all the effort and leave the old seawall there, in my opinion, especially if the goal is to make a resilient structure that's going to give you, say, 75 to 100 years of life. Probably want to rebuild the seawall.
And if that's going to be rebuilt, what about rebuilding the seawall in front of the marina?
So I think that at some point, the city is gonna be faced with needing to rebuild that seawall. When we started looking at this project, and if you go to one of the day boards, it shows you that, right, even if we bring up the new facility to elevation 9, the rest of the seawall in the parking lot will not be brought up to that elevation. That's phase 2 or 3, or whatever the city, all municipalities all up and down the East Coast are gonna be faced with the same thing. Their parking lots are gonna have to be raised, lift stations are gonna have to be raised, pump stations, all that stuff, just for sea level rise. So that would be another phase of the project. When we started looking at this last summer, and we showed you the inundation graphics, the flooding graphics, we were looking at, hey, at that point, we were looking at how could we get resilience for all of downtown? How could we expand this project to get benefit to all the property owners that are along Bay Street? What that does, though, is now that throws in the whole parking lot and then the rest of the park into this project. And when we started to look at it from that angle, then the cost just starts to get so out of hand, you can't really manage it all. I mean, not without a budget. If there was maybe, millions and millions on the table, but we kind of scaled it back, right, to just limit our investigation to the structure and figure out how do we replace this structure and then tie it back into the park. And in the course of that, we found that everybody just loves what they have. They love the brick, the red brick, the tabby pavers, the swings and the trees. And they love what they have, and they want it back. So
I'm struggling a little bit with, we get to early June, there's a recommendation going to RFP, et cetera. But there's just this massive elephant in the room of how we're gonna pay for it, and what's the process for getting grants, and what are grants gonna pay for, and how can we go up an RFP if we don't know what grants are gonna pay for?
I agree with that, and I think that's something I know Eric and I had discussed a little bit. I don't know if this is a setting where you want to mention anything, Eric, but there are grants out there. We don't know what's available yet, what would be qualified yet.
So, and I, not to interrupt you.
No, please.
I think the idea is that you can phase design and permitting. So that's going to be a process in and of itself. So over that time period, whether that be a year or longer through that process, that's when we're trying to identify what grant funding looks like. So with the allocation or the reallocation of funding that city council made at the last council meeting on the park bond, we at least have some seed money to be able to go out for an RFQ to try to get a designer on board. And that can be broken up into different phases, 30, 60, 90% plans.
And just curious how even designing it, if we don't really know what we're looking at, whether that's kind of wasted money or not, as far as what we can get someone to pay for, frankly.
Until we outlay some effort towards the actual design and permitting of it, I feel like all the effort we have done up until this point looks outstanding for a competitive grant effort, because we've engaged the public, we've come up with all these concepts, we will have done an alternatives analysis, which is absolutely going to be required for any grant or any permit. So all the work we've done is great. We can build up to it with them, but I think until like Eric said, until you get a 30% set of plans from a consultant that says, look, this is a cost estimate within a 25 to 30% margin of error, where you subsequently tighten that down more between the 30, 60s and the 90s, then we're going to look a lot better for grant. I would think. Now, I'm not an expert in grants.
I mean, where I look at it also is, if You know, there's some question of whether we can include some of the marina work in whatever grants we get. Is that gonna be part of the design work? I guess we don't know, but in a perfect world, we would get some money for that or even seawall for that matter.
I think. And just thinking out loud, I think the grants potentially have, it's either grants or permitting are gonna have a huge impact on time. And then potentially the overall project scope, right? And the footprint and maybe to a lesser extent, some of the aesthetics, but really, yeah, it could be, okay, well, there's $30 million sitting out there at the Department of Transportation. But to be able to do that, we got to improve the DADOT too. I'm just saying, just guessing. And then that opens up that whole, well, now we got to go back and engage the public and figure out, okay, well, do we want to take, because all the money comes with stipulations. So now you got to go back and engage the public and see if you want to, or the stakeholders. And that can influence a project, right? You may start in the preliminary design, then you find out there's a whole pile of money over here, and then you realize, oh, you got to add this to be competitive to get that pool of money. And so, yeah, you could have scope creep where your consultant's working on the relieving platform, but you find out, oh, well, if you incorporate the marina, then we can get a whole other, I mean, I don't know.
Is there any, I mean, we can very well have a new Congress in November. Is there any way to get at least some things done beforehand on the grant front, or is it just too far off?
I think on the grant side of things, we can start looking to see what's available. I think the intent with the city is to wrap that into that next phase. And one of the things that I had mentioned to Eric prior to the meeting was, you don't necessarily have to lump the grant investigation in with the design and the permitting phase. The city could say, hey, look, we really want to go with another consultant who's really, their only job is to find us money.
Yeah.
We're paying them a bunch of money to find us a whole bunch more money. And then you let the consultants design and permit the relieving platform, and everybody all kind of works together. That's one way to do it. JMT, a member of our staff, they've got like 30 grant writers.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I had suggested is before it goes to RFP, maybe the city and the JMT staff talk a little bit just to say, okay, what would timelines and what would cost outlays be? And what impact would it have on the project timeframe? And should this be part of the consultant permitting and design phases so that all consultants are kind of talking there, or should it be more of a separate task? So, because there's a lot of stuff that we've done grants with the city and for the city, but not of this magnitude where you need somebody who can like go, hey, Lindsay, what you got, coming down the pipe for me?
Yeah.
Would money be involved with paying for the design?
Sometimes they are. There are.
Or would the city have to come up with money to pay for the design activity? To move from 30 to 60 to 90 and then then the grant activity would follow.
I think what Eric was saying is that you guys moved the money, the 900, whatever. The money was moved over, and that's going to start the process for the consultants. Now, after the project starts and you do go for grants, there are certain grants, like I know the boating infrastructure grant will absolutely prorate all the engineering services if the engineering services are all going towards the part of the grant eligible, basically they'll fund or prorate engineering services. Some of them, not all of them, but. So it may be, that the city only has to tap into a third of that before we find a grant that says, okay, well, we'll fund the rest of it, or maybe not. Maybe it's a stipulation that no, the city's got to pay for all of those services, but the feds will kick in, whatever, who knows?
Josh, is that 900 ring fence?
Is this? It is, yeah, so it was recommitted from our local accommodations and hospitality bond to fund the waterfront partner. So that is likely the next step of funding engineering, but it's committed to the waterfront nonetheless.
When we go out for the engineering, is that going to be a competitive bid?
Yes. Has to be.
Has to be, okay. And will it be a lump sum?
We would,
How
so
would you structure the
likely
contract?
we would structure it as an RFQ
Right,
rather than an RFP. So that way we select the right consultant based upon qualifications, not necessarily price up front.
Okay.
At that point, you can break the design up into those different design phases.
Yeah.
And you would negotiate the cost on each one of those phases up front. That way, whether that $972,000 is just the seed money to be able to get all that started, or there's other funding that has to come along with that, you'd at least be able to move through several phases of that design.
okay,
And buy yourself time to be able to come up with the rest if you don't have it all
right,
at upfront. Once you get to construction, that's where it becomes more of a challenge because you have to have all that funding up front before you can ever go out and advertise.
Right.
So we have more flexibility on the front end on the design needs.
925.
No, it's at 925.
I said, yeah.
I'm sorry.
No,
Bill, is there you see a role for this committee with respect to grant looking or funding? Or is that a process, a function that is so integral to the design that really needs to be handled by people who are involved in the design and engineering of the project?
I'm not real sure to be honest, because I've only worked on a couple of smaller grants really with just the city. In fact, I think Linda and I worked on the last grant we did for the day doc. So as far as the bigger grants and some of these other ones, I mean, that would be a question that I would ask the grant staff who's, members of our team that aren't here today. We take any input you guys have, so if you guys wanna.
It would be helpful to have input because we are in possession of some information from Congressman Basis staff. They've identified maybe a half dozen grants. We have not at this point looked in or behind any of them, so we don't know what they're made of. But we're sitting there with this information and I'm not quite sure what we should do with it.
Well, I mean, I think what would be good, like I said, if I can facilitate a meeting with some of the grant writers with JMT, who's a member of our team and the city. You guys, maybe you guys could talk about it. I don't really know what to tell you because I don't know what information you have or what you can do with it. I'm just an engineer.
We need to talk to someone who
Yeah.
knows something about this stuff.
Mhm. The best I can tell you is I can find you the right person that, would be able to answer your question.
That would be useful.
I appreciate you adding cost in there because it absolutely is a factor, and I'm surprised that it didn't come up in the public charrette as some of the comments, but hearing what you said in regards to investigating the economic benefit versus the cost of cruise ships, I think is an important aspect of this because part of me feels like if it's financially feasible, then building for that capacity, even if the constituents today and the stakeholders today don't want it, that's fine. We don't have to have it. But if we're redoing this, building and adding in that structural integrity to allow the next generation, should they desire that, to have that accessibility, I think is wise. But it has to be dependent on the cost, right? How much is that going to change the project, number one? And then number two, what is the economic benefit of the cruise ships downtown? Do we get more of a benefit from them shuttling in from Port Royal and being there for the day? Or is it better for them to be right there at the waterfront? I don't know the answer to that question, but I think that a deeper dive into trying to answer those questions is prudent. And then I think we talked about this last time, but am I remembering it right to expect that we would anticipate once we start the design and the permitting phase for that to take 6 months to a year? Is that accurate?
No, you're gonna be much longer than that.
Much longer than that for design and permitting.
You're probably gonna be 18 months minimum, I'm thinking, for a design and permit. The permit's gonna take a year. Once you get the
Once you
permit
get the
in,
design,
once you get
once you get the design done.
once you get the
They don't
permit in, you got.
have, currently they happen one after the other.
There, for this one, we would probably get the design done and then submit for the permit.
Right.
There's, on smaller projects, we'll do concurrent pieces and parts to try to game it, have them all, be done at the end. I have a feeling with this one, we're probably gonna have to get further along in the design anyway, just because that's gonna be necessary for any type of grant stuff. Okay, and then it could be that we're getting grants from some people who would look really good on the permit application too. Hey, this project is being funded in part by the South Carolina Sea Grant or blibbity blobby blue, real nice environmental sounding name entity or something, so.
Okay, so 18 months essentially for your design permitting phase would be. And that's reflected in the timeline here on.
I think
on the
that's gonna be
website.
a minimum.
Yeah.
That's gonna be a minimum. I mean, there's still a lot more that's left to be done before you can just go ahead and start designing, a new pier. And there's still survey work that has to be done. We still have to do some geotech stuff that has to be done. So there is still, there's a heck of a lot of work left till you can get to a design and a permit.
So I want to make sure I understand the difference in option 3 and option 2, right? So you're relieving platform, elevated, what we have now versus seawall backfill. And my understanding based on commentary at this point is essentially that it would be more permitting involved, more cost involved in the seawall and backfill because of where the critical line is. I looked at what the mitigation credits might be just based on some projects in Charleston and elsewhere. I think that's probably marginal in comparison to the total project cost, but the cost increases are not necessarily related to the mitigation credits that you would need to purchase, but more so in the excavation of what's there now, right? All of the silt underneath, and then the cost of bringing fill, that substantial amount of fill.
That is correct. That is a tremendous amount of dirt would need to be brought in. The other thing is the wall itself. The wall, the water depth right now at the corner by the pavilion where we had the public meeting is like 24 foot deep. And then it's another 4 foot to the surface. So you'd have to have a 30-foot tall seawall there. I'm just saying, maybe it's 28, maybe it's 27. That's a massive wall. You would need to it would probably be so big and so heavy, you would probably have to support the wall itself on piling, just to be able to hold the weight of the wall in the bottom of the Beaufort River. So I think the mass of the wall itself would be so huge to keep it from rotating over in that 30 foot of water, that just the cost of the structure, independent of bringing in a gajillion yards of backfill to fill it all in and your labor gets really high up there, right? Because with a wharf, man, they go and drive piles, and once you drive piles, you're out of the water, you're out of the dirt, you're up off the ground. You're on a solid, clean, nice work surface to work on, and your workers can get to work. If you're still trying to figure out how you're pouring concrete 20 feet underwater and driving the piles and doing all that, I think combination of labor and then the materials would just.
And the pros to that would be, obviously, you don't have to do the continuing maintenance and you're not gonna have to
That's
revisit
correct.
it in 75 years.
That's correct. You would basically, it would just be a land mass now that's retained instead of a marine structure. And so that's what you'd be doing. You'd just be changing it to a land mass being retained by a marine structure as opposed to just doing a marine structure.
And I guess I just want to make sure that as a recommending committee to council, that we're fully vetting that option to understand, one, what that difference in cost would be, but it's mainly related to the fact that if we do a relieving platform 75 years from now, we're gonna have to revisit and expend money on replacing the platform or be in the same situation that we're in now versus never having to deal with that again.
Well, not necessarily, because you're making the assumption that a wall would require no maintenance either, and from that standpoint, I'd call that a wash, because probably 80% of my job is designing seawalls in South Carolina, and there's a lot of old ones that need replaced and repaired, so they're just as susceptible to the same degradation characteristics that
The pilings.
the pilings can be, and so.
Wall has to be replaced probably, so.
Yeah, and so, I mean, if you really just look at. It's really hard when you're looking at 7,500 years to extrapolate, okay, well, what's the, using the time value of money, what's my maintenance cost gonna be, in the future on this thing? It's really difficult to do with marine structures. But I think the most appropriate thing to do is to look at what your cost outlay would be today on it, and then consider basically your maintenance cost in 75 years. I would just consider that a wash for the purposes of this exercise. I mean, it's germane to the conversation, but it's still 75 years away. And I think what's of more influence now is, okay, what's the initial cost going to be to meet the goal? It's kind of where I would go with it. And even though we have not done enough of a design where we can really tighten those numbers down and say, yeah, with a degree of accuracy, this is exactly what this option is going to cost. We just know via the fact we've got like Duncan O'Quinn on the team. Him and I have talked at length about these scenarios, and I've done several, back of the envelope. Hey, if we did it like this, where would this order of magnitude be, type of thing. And so we know it's significantly more expensive. What we don't know is exactly, to the dollar, how much more that option is, but we know it's more expensive, substantially more expensive.
From an expectation management standpoint for the public and the businesses downtown, when we're talking about driving piles, is it gonna be 2 or 3 years of like insanity? Just bang, 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 bang every single day?
Well, so
Not your lawyer, but I would suggest you don't answer that.
So, oh yeah, they're gonna go crazy, just like when we did the day dock. When we did the day dock, we picked them up and we vibrated most of those piles in. I forget how many we stuck out there, but they're big piles, 18 spot. We vibrated most of them in, and then we picked up a hammer and we hit each one of them about 10 times with a diesel hammer, which was really loud.
Yeah.
And it will be that. What I would anticipate right now, you have your pile dense, so every row of piling is at 12 feet. Okay, that's crazy short for concrete. I would look at going in, and I'd like to go minimum of like a 20-foot, maybe more than that. And hey, let's only put in half of the piling that are there now, because when we say rebuild it back, we're not saying let's rebuild what's there. We're saying let's go back with bigger piling and less of them, bigger piling and longer spans. And we're going to be able to do that because now we don't have 6 feet of dead load of dirt on top of it. You'd have been able to get a heck of a lot longer span and use a lot less piles if there wasn't 6 feet of dead load on top of that.
What's gonna happen to the existing piles? Are you gonna remove them? Or cut them down, or?
So I would say they either get snapped at the mud line or they get fully extracted. That would be kind of up to the contractor and or the regulatory agencies. Typically, what I do is say full removal, but if you can't remove them, go ahead and extract them.
Now, the new piles,
Or, cut 'em.
are they friction piles or or is there some, or hitting any kind of bedrock down there?
So we don't have any bedrock in South Carolina, well, at least in coastal South Carolina. What we have around here is limestone. So out in the Beaufort River, we have, it's like 20, the data, this is the one I remember offhand, I'm sorry. It's like 20 feet of water, 20 feet of pudding, like mud, like just no structural value pudding. And then you had a very tight sand that they couldn't even drive their sampler through to get the geotech. So there's limestone, there's these limestone layers all throughout Beaufort. So it depends. That's part of what, so the next phase, what they'll probably do is they will probably have to go in and we will probably start cutting holes through the platform so that we can put a drill rig through the platform to get actual soil borings in the footprint of the platform because of how varied the bottom changes. So it'll be friction piles, probably gonna have to put H-pile stingers on them.
Are these round piles or are they square piles?
I would assume they'll be square. I mean, that's up to the consultant, whoever designs the structure for you.
I'm thinking round pile where we wouldn't have that friction with the water.
You don't see that too much anymore. DOT used octagonal piles for many years. I don't know why they stopped using them, but if you go out to the Broad River Pier, a lot of old DOT bridges use 24-inch octagonals. I don't know why they stopped.
See where, you know, that smooth.
Sure.
surface, Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Just thinking along those lines. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just said this is not so much engineering, but, you know. The plates over the fence and everything are gonna be nursery school compared to how it's gonna impact businesses and tourism. And just having 2 years. Bang, 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 all day, every day.
Yeah, and the downside is we don't have another way around it.
No, I
right?
know.
You know, that's kind of why I was asking. I just want to make sure that if the option is for leaving platform,
Yeah.
that we're fully vetting that and we
Yeah.
understand that that is the really only feasible course of action because it is going to be a lot more disruptive. At least I imagine that it would be more disruptive. But if we've got to do it
Yeah.
to get the park open, we've got to do it.
We have to have people understand exactly what it's gonna be and
Yeah.
how we're gonna help mitigate that.
But what do you need, at this point from this committee before going to the next step? And what is the next step?
I think the next step for us is to finalize this phase 2, so the city can use this momentum to go into phase 3, which is the design and permitting and try to find the money for this thing, for the grant. So as I said earlier, what I would like to do is just, we're gonna finalize our alternatives analysis now that we have public comment. Public comment will be one of the factors that goes into the weighting that we're coming up with our alternatives analysis. We're gonna finish that up by the 1st of June. I think what would be good is to have a recommendation from the committee to have something. I mean, I have reported to you guys more or less and the city. Throughout this, you guys have given the input. Your input was kind of the impetus for the public engagement boards. So I think having something from you all would be good to at least include in our summary, whatever that looks like. In other words, if you guys just have a good feeling of, hey, we want to go with, we agree with the public, option 2 sounds like it's the most reasonable, then that would be good information for us to have as we summarize and then make a recommendation to the city.
Would your final phase 2 report, what would it include in the way of cost estimate?
I think what we were really looking to do at this point, because we haven't been able to do any of the design effort, is just look at orders of magnitude and just try to come up with, if we can't come up with high dollar amounts, some other way to represent the varying cost of each of these alternatives. At this point, I don't know how at this point, I don't know how detailed we can get into the cost.
Final, your next step, your next iteration will not be anything in the way of more detailed design.
No, not in this phase, this phase, because what you're talking about with the detailed design and the permitting, that is in the next phase that the city is going to issue an RFQ for.
Is there, I guess it's probably off the cuff, a meaningful time difference between rebuild as is versus seawall?
Yeah, I think the seawall is gonna take you a lot longer too. That was another thing that I had a discussion with O'Quinn about, is because there's a lot more work in the water. Because you gotta figure out, okay, how much concrete do we have to pour underwater? Do we have to? I'm just of a mind that for a 30-foot tall wall out there, it's probably not gonna be just drive sheet piling, right? People think, well, you can just go and drive steel sheet pile. What's that gonna look like? Steel sheet pile is gonna rust. It's gonna look terrible for you guys, and you guys are gonna hate it. It's gonna be all rusty and nasty. So you're gonna have to do it out of concrete. Okay, so now you gotta form up and pour a 30-foot tall concrete wall underwater. That's 1,200 feet long. Is it gonna take more time to do that, or just have your marine contractor who lives around the corner push up in here and go boom, 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 boom?
So is it that much easier, if we have to replace the existing seawall, is it, don't you have that same problem, or is it so much more shallow?
No, because where the existing seawall is now is on land.
Oh.
You can get to it from land. You can get to it from water. I mean, it's like there's trees growing on top of it and planters and stuff. So what I would envision with that, and again, I think this will come out in the design, probably what I would look at doing is leave the old seawall. Don't even pull that thing out. Drive a new seawall directly behind it. And then nobody's ever gonna see the old seawall. You don't have to pay to have it removed. Just leave it there. We'll put the new one behind it. That way we're not even permitting a seawall there. We're permitting a seawall we're placing a seawall behind a new seawall. So that part wouldn't be permitted. That's how I would probably do it.
You actually would be putting a new seawall on the other side of the critical line, though.
Yeah, on the backside of the critical line. So it'd be in state jurisdiction. If we went behind the existing wall, it'd be in city jurisdiction, not state jurisdiction. That's weird. 1 inch can make a difference.
So, limit the amount of usable park when this is all going on, if anyone's even allowed down there, would be less. Because we've been.
I think so. I think there's a good chance in that. Now, the other thing that was discussed is the good thing is there is, I mean, if there is really a good thing about spending all this money and all that, it is a linear project when you get right down to it. It's 36 feet wide and 1,200 foot long, so you could phase it.
Yeah.
And you could phase it to still have a large portion of the park open at any given time, just depending on how the contractor does it. The other thing I think that you run into as well, and this is not going to be captured in any of the cost estimates that are today, is I think in the design process, I think you have ways to do some value engineering. Whereas now, if I'm gonna come up with, okay, what's it gonna cost to rebuild it like it is now? I'm just guessing. But when I sit down and I'm really running numbers, I can say, okay, well, if I just tweak this a little bit, I can get, one less pile per vent, and then that cascades, and then before you know it, you're like, wow, I was able to use, 300 less yards of concrete and 10,000 less tons of steel in this design, and that saved you all a ton of money. And you all never even knew it. But that goes into the design, so. I don't know if I answered any of your questions.
You did, and I think it's for myself, but it's also for the public. To
Absolutely.
understand that we're doing our best to understand what the best and most feasible option
Sure.
is and why. And I don't even feel like, I don't know at what point in the design, whether it's 30, 60, 90, that these amenities would come in, but I mean, obviously, I would like to see us focus more so on the structural side of this and not so much on whether there's, a splash pad or, whatever other amenities are there, because I think at this point, it's next to irrelevant, right? I mean, there will be a time where we can get that feedback from the community to see exactly, you know, what they would want in regards to any amenity enhancement. But right now, we're focusing on what structural alternative makes the most sense. And then how do we get to that next step of design and engineering so that we can better understand the cost and what permits we'll need, and then what grant funds are available. The amenities are aside to all of this.
Sure, and honestly, I think that came out in the data where it shows that you have option 2, and then a close second is option 4. And I think you have more people with option 2 that just said what you said. Hey, let's focus on the structure. Let's focus on getting our park back. We'll worry about the more is better later, but that's not really even at the, you know, not even worth talking about a splash pad when we don't even have a park right now. So, and I think that kind of bore itself out in the data that we reviewed.
We did this survey and your charrette the other night and all the data you put together. You look at these numbers and do we have enough input from the population? These are small numbers, 26 responses, 39. Are we going to be caught short and say, hey, you didn't let us sit on it? Do we feel as a committee and as a city that we've done our best effort to get out there to the public and invite the public in? I mean, these numbers are small and we did our best. I'm just saying that, are we gonna bite us in the ass 6 months from now that people are gonna say, well, we didn't have anything to say about it? Is this something we should be concerned with, or just go along with what we've got?
Well, we did have the online survey. We had 1,700 and something.
That's true too. Right. That was a good
Feedback.
turnout.
But those pieces of feedback were not related to what we're talking about right here.
Correct.
For the most part, they're related to amenities.
I think the word got out. I mean, after my public present, people sent me all kinds of links from the Island Packet and Beaufort Gazette, which I think also linked the city's website. So, you know, I think the word got out, but I mean, you know how these things go. You could do it in skywriting and there'd be a contingent of people who said, well, you never told me.
Right.
You know, and that's always gonna
I
happen.
know we did our best effort. I think, but I'm just concerned that later on, we're gonna have a big meeting in front of the council.
Well, no, and I think it's a fair point to be concerned, because sometimes you feel like you could never have enough opportunities, but the other side to that is I know for myself as a representative, some of the feedback that I'm getting are people, they don't want us to get tangled up in trying to get all of this public feedback. Yes, the opportunities that we've provided have been helpful for those that want to engage in that, but really they just want the park open. They just want us to
Just
move
keep
on
going.
it. Yeah,
Okay.
and so I don't think there's any way
I just wanna
around.
make sure we're,
Yep.
that there's we could have an issue later on.
If you read the results of the online survey
Right.
and look at what we've got here from the charrette, the basic advice from the public is they want to see what they used to have back
And get it done.
and get it done.
Okay. All right.
I'm not sure we need any.
Okay, good.
That was my takeaway.
Okay.
But I mean, that's a very, very good, you know.
Harbor, you know.
I thought the results were a little dismal too, at 191 total responses.
Right.
You know, I thought that was a little dismal, but you do what you can do, and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think that's the takeaway. They want it back, what they got, maybe a little nicer, a little higher,
Yeah.
and now.
They're yelling, Josh. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're gonna stand us down.
Would there typically be another public forum input when we get to the next phase of this is what it's looking like?
What I would recommend, the short answer is yes, there should be. My personal opinion is the city should leave that website section open for the duration, and they could, that's just a clearinghouse, a repository for all this stuff. That's a good way, and I think we should continue to keep public comments and monitor those public comments as they come in throughout the design process. Where I think it's really going to be critical is not so much in the structural design, because man, Joe Public doesn't care if that's a 14 or a 16-inch pile, and if there's 10 of them or 100 of them. He just doesn't want it to fall down on him and his kids, right? Get it. So where they will care is the aesthetics at the end of the day. The stuff that we showed where there was like the little sloped lawn, there's a lot of people who aren't gonna like the sloped lawn idea because it's just gonna get eroded away. I tend to agree with them. They're gonna want planters. There's people who aren't gonna wanna see any more benches or no more. That, I think, is where it's gonna be really important because so from my part, let's just say that you asked me to design this thing tomorrow. My part gets you to a 1,200-foot long, 40-foot wide, blank slate of concrete. The city can do anything with it. You could put anything on it. You can do anything with it. It's a freaking blank slate. What does it look like? That's what Joe Public is gonna be concerned about. How does it all tie back in? And that's where I think you're gonna wanna make sure that there's a landscaping architect contingent, and that's where I think public feedback is gonna be real important. It's okay, well, do we put the swings right back where they were? Do we need to put them closer to the water? Do we need, this pavilion is rusty and all that. Do we like this pavilion? I mean, there's that, I think, is probably where you're gonna get the more bang for the buck, because that's the stuff the public's gonna see. For the next 12 months, it's all gonna be stuff that they're not even gonna be able to look at physically. So, and it probably won't really be that important.
They're gonna care if there's cost overruns, and I guess at the end of the day, if we have 12% inflation, God forbid, and our grants were for X, people are gonna care if all of a sudden the city has to raise revenue. So I assume there's checkpoints along the way there, as we go along. Because again, people will care about the dollars and cents if all of a sudden it's gonna come out of their pocket.
A lot of times with the submittal process that Eric was talking about, that 30, 60, 90, is a lot of times it's a 30% design, but then you're also doing 30% cost estimates based on that. And then you're continually refining all the goals as you go along. And then, sometimes you take it from a 90 to a 95 and then a final, so there's usually a lot of checks along the way. But at the end of the day, man, until the bids come back in, and marine construction, there's two price points. You got expensive and more expensive.
Yeah,
That's it.
11,200, the millage rates go up, that's for sure.
Yeah. So,
You brought up an interesting point so we decide and we go ahead and proceed with the phase or plan 2. Gonna rebuild, make a new platform. But then we're getting to like the landscape architecture, or you were speaking like an engineer, not an architect. You're gonna build them. So now that's when we need the public to come back in again and have maybe another charrette or something like that, where we have the slopes and benches and tiers, or however they want to see the park to look like.
yeah, or you just have you have the consultant do a preliminary design submittal, or you make the 30% submittals available to the public, right? So in other words, the consultant with his 30% submittal is not just going to give you the schematic blueprints, they're also going to give you the nice little pretty picture. Right, that the public understands.
That they can see, yeah.
That's the 30, and then, you could have it all depends on how these guys want to structure the RFP process, so that the consultant knows. A lot of times the federal government does it like that. They do 30, 60, and 90s, along the way, not so much local and state municipalities, but it is a good way to have breaks.
Well, we get that public input.
And at those breaks, you can get that public input. That's where it's. Yeah. Yeah.
A small one.
I mean, ultimately, this is, there's pure democracy and there's republic form of government. At some point, you can't have a referendum for everything. You can take input, but people have to make decisions who have been put in a position to make decisions.
Yeah. Yeah, and us as consultants, we try to do is just get all the information together and package it up and present it to you guys, the stakeholders and the public, and let you make the decision, because it's your money. We, you know, we want to spend it wisely. So that, you know, that's what we try to do. And that's what we've tried to do with this whole public engagement thing, is assist you guys in the city by getting that information together and then giving you all of our opinions as consultants and saying, hey, here's what we think. Let us know what you guys think.
So, trying to circle back around to your comment about, a recommendation from this body, and just to kind of get thoughts at the table here. And Eric chime in. If we wanted to say pass a recommendation that would support option 2 to city council at their next meeting, May 12th, so that they could choose to support or commit some of the funding for the waterfront park to the next step in this process, would that date be something that you would be able to meet? Like, would your summary be ready for proposal to council by
The 12th?
the 12th? No, it would not be. So
No, and I think we need to. Sorry, no, it will not, because that's what, like next Wednesday, next Tuesday. I don't think it'll be ready by then. I mean, I'm looking at by June, having the alternatives analysis completely done. If there's a way to get it done by next week, I don't think there is. No, and I don't think that's gonna happen, not in a week.
Next meeting of this committee is June 1st.
Okay.
Have something by June 1st, you think?
Yeah, that's the plan, is to have some by June. I would like to. I think it would make sense to have y'all's recommendation, if you have a recommendation, unless y'all don't want your recommendation included with our final alternatives analysis. I think it would be worth putting in there, because I have spoken to you guys
I think so too, and I don't know what we would expect to see in addition as you finish your analysis, but if there wasn't that much that was gonna change, as you wrap it up from what we've seen already, then I don't know why this board wouldn't be able to provide a recommendation based on what we've seen and heard for option 2. And then in the event that you could have something done by our next meeting, then great. And if not, then that just means that at the second reading of our budget, we would see obviously the memo or whatever
Yeah.
from this committee that supports option 2 in conjunction with your summary. And then if we went ahead and said, okay, well, let's set aside X amount for engineering and design work, then we would still have that opportunity before we close out the budget to do so.
I need to look. I can probably get you guys something by next week. I just don't know if I can check all the boxes that I need to check to meet the cities, the requirements that I have contracts with the city
Right.
that we have. So I gotta look and see what we said we're gonna give for I gotta look at my scope and see what and if it can be done in that amount of time. If I think in the very least, I can probably give you guys like the matrix that we're working on, with the alternatives analysis, with the final ranking from the public opinion. And I'll see if we can get something together.
Yeah, I think that this committee ought to have reviewed whatever it is going to go to council prior to that, so that we can say, yes, this is our recommendation to go forward.
Okay, which is fine by me, if that's,
So we can have a special meeting.
What is the difference in information?
not really anything. It would just be, hey, if you guys support option 2 and you support, and that lines up with what the public says, that's just another data point that I would put in there for the recommendation to the city. But that doesn't have to come from my report at all. Or from the McSweeney report or our team. You guys can do that independently, like you just said. Is we can furnish our report completely independent, and you guys can draw your own conclusion based on our report and what I presented to you here today. That's fine too. It doesn't, however you guys want want to do it, it's fine.
Yes, what would you think we would see different than what we've seen or discussed already in regards to needing it to come back to this committee?
I'm not sure, but Bill said he's gonna take some time to prepare. Report on the final phase. I don't know what's gonna go into that beyond, obviously something's gonna go into it beyond what we have now, or it wouldn't take time.
Yeah. Well, we're finalizing an alternatives analysis, so we're basically got to go back through and repackage everything that we spoke about here, and we're gonna do it in a matrices form with a cover letter and such.
But that's not any additional information. That's.
Oh, as far as like new stuff, no, there's nothing new.
It's
that's
just to make
coming.
sure that the information that you compile meets the check boxes with your contract.
Correct.
with the city,
It's-
But it's not anything
Correct.
that this body would need to review or even benefit from reviewing.
So I don't anticipate for the duration of McSweeney Engineer and our team, the McSweeney Engineer's involvement with phase two. This committee will be getting no new information from me, okay, for phase two at all. Now, if the city decides to select our team for the design and permitting, then you will hear a lot more from me, presumably. But for the rest of this phase, you will not be getting any new information from me. It's just a matter of me compiling and presenting it, making sure that I've checked the boxes that we told the city we were gonna give them. Yeah, to make sure we'll get there.
I'm not opposed to having a special meeting. I just don't know what the value would be because we're not gonna get any new information.
Yeah, no, I was under the impression there'd be another iteration of this, of option two, but it sounds like there will be.
I think that final report is gonna be very valuable when we start applying for these grants.
Yeah.
Because now it shows wherever we apply that we've gone through this very public process and we've involved engineering firms, the public, separate committees. That's where that becomes really valuable.
I'm just not sure what the next phase means and how tied in we are, because a lot of this is qualitative, as far as option two versus, versus the seawall option. We think it'll take longer, we think it'll cost a lot more, but it's really not quantitative at this point. So I'm not sure if that's just the way it's gonna be, as we move on to the next phase, or whether we're gonna have something more concrete to look at.
My suggestion on that is the consultant team that was hired under the qualification process, like Eric had mentioned. You hired the team because that team was recognized as the leading experts, being able to kind of guide the city in the right direction. As part of that guidance, your consultants are telling you that option three is going to be much more costly, more difficult from a labor aspect, from a regulatory aspect, from a time aspect, from an every aspect. We don't have any way to quantify that without also doing a 30% design over here and a 30% design over here and trying to compare those. So I would encourage you guys to say, okay, well, we hired who we thought were the foremost experts in this, and they're saying, listen, this is an option, but it's not going to be the best option for you guys. And for lack of a better term, I'll leave it at that. Now, can you quantify that? Absolutely, we can quantify that, but that involves you got to actually start getting into some of the design stuff, because up until that, we're just kind of guessing. So I think at the end of the day, I really honestly believe that if you were to work all the numbers out, that it would show that option three was going to be more expensive than option two. This process that we did got us to that conclusion at a less expense.
Are there any positives in your mind of option three? I.e., is it by its nature already designed to take a cruise ship? In other words, not any additional
No, I really don't see any distinct advantage over a seawall versus a wharf in this arrangement. I think the city would probably be better served with a wharf. You know, which is really what option 2 is.
There is support for a recommendation.
Well, I guess that's where we are right now.
I'm just thinking about.
Even all the cars we have, then I'd say option 2.
Yeah. That goes back to move along with it.
Yeah.
Get something done.
And look, it's not like I need a formal recommendation or a document from you tonight. And like, if the committee feels more comfortable waiting until you see our formal recommendation, that's fine too. I just wanted to make sure we at least had the discussion on whether I'm including it or you guys are gonna hold off and wait until either way, the city will get their hands on the documents, which will be necessary for the next steps that they're gonna need.
I mean, we do own Grant's Tomb, but we never buried Grant's Tomb, so I think we should probably just do it as fast as we can.
From an experience standpoint, David, I think what they're saying from a design.
Yeah.
It's right.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is that we know what's gonna be a formal recommendation.
I think, yeah, let's open up this meeting to everyone who's here, who's not a member of the committee, including people who are out there. And once we've heard public comment, public questions, then we can consider what our next step is. That's it.
Thank you. I'm Rob Cahill, 608 Water Street. Thank you for all the hard work that you're doing as this advisory group. It's valuable. I learned a lot by being here. A couple comments. One, I would encourage you not to use the word charrette. What happened the other week is nowhere near a charrette. That's a 3 to 7 day collaborative process that goes through lots of iterations. That was a look-see, but please, I know you have a new PAO coming on board later this month. Please don't call it a charrette. Anyone that knows what a charrette is, this isn't even close to that, so I think it creates a different impression of that. Second, and Josh, I'm glad you're here, because as I understand it, with no disrespect intended to anybody else, you're the only decision maker in this room. This is gonna go to council to make a decision. If I was a decision maker, I would want to flush out more about option 2 and 4. Based on 150 people that decide to show up, that's nowhere near, to me, information to make a sweeping check to disband option 4. I would want to really drill down, and then as Bill and everyone else has said, yeah, cost is going to be pivotal. So none of that has cost, but at this stage, before you advance a recommendation on option 2, I'm saying 150 people, oh, I think you're really, really vulnerable on that and can't defend it. So that's my 2 points.
And real quick, Mr. Cahill, on option 4, you're talking about the relieving platform elevated with additional amenities, or were you talking about the seawall backfill?
The amenities, like, I mean, some people
Like boardwalk.
like a
out there.
different boardwalk outside and some people don't. I mean, that's an aesthetic deal, and I don't know we have enough knowledge about that. But again, these costs is gonna be overlaying so much of this, so
Yeah,
I would just wanna know more about that and someone gets there, because I think it's clear, abundantly clear from your meetings, and you've been at this, thank you again. People want what was there, the feel of what was there and all the vibe that goes along with that. But I don't know that people know enough beyond that. You know, way back when I was working at Weyerhaeuser Company, the Japanese wanted quiet refrigerators. Nobody understood why, till they peeled all the data, because refrigerators in their living room. That's why they wanted quiet refrigerators. I work with Social Security. They have a whole lot of work and all this survey, and when did it come back? They wanted softer chairs. What? Softer chairs? You kidding me? It's because they went there to socialize. They didn't care if they got through the line faster. They went there to socialize. They wanted softer chairs. It was just not so counterintuitive, but it was, you thought about it and listened to people, that's why they wanted softer chairs. And those were write-ins. It was not a question, you want softer chairs. And so those are examples with a lot of people.
No, I think that's a fair point, and my understanding, Bill, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but if we were to move forward with a recommendation for, say, option 2, then there would still be time for us to address the amenities down the road, because as we move into the 30, 60, 90% design portion, we understand more of what that cost is gonna be, which permits are gonna be required, but we also have time to factor in the amenity enhancement side of this. And so option 2 doesn't restrict option 4, really. There's still opportunity for us to do some of the amenity enhancements that
That's
were
correct.
reflected on that.
Josh,
Right.
that was my understanding too.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really hub and spoke. I mean, the hub is really getting.
Yeah. But I think that's a very fair point, because we are gonna wanna come back to obviously some of the enhancements that have been discussed. It's just, I think if we move forward now with this, it provides us the ability to get to a better understanding as we do that.
And then Josh, to his point and your point about the limited number of people at the actual in-person event. What was the survey? Almost 8,000?
that survey.
Oh, 1,700. I thought I heard 7,900. Sorry about that. But I mean, so 1,700, and these options were on that survey, right? Or some
Yeah.
variation of
Some
it.
variation of it, yeah.
We could have some short-term rentals.
Here you go. We
It's
put that to rest in our last meeting.
So your instincts are solid. I think, Barb, let people know what's happening around the corner, because is without talking social district here, I mean, people have they're holding different parts of this elephant. There was a person that talked to council last week, and he said, boy, you included everybody but us. I'm thinking, excuse me, I've been to a lot of these meetings. I've never seen you at these meetings, but you face it all the time. They've been, you know, you had multiple opportunities. In fact, you chose not to come. Don't lay that on the decision makers. And yet they don't feel bound by any of that kind of credibility. So anyway, thank you for what you're doing, and you're here, and I'm sure you're responsible agents. And again, I know the checks in the mail, right? You're volunteering your time.
Yes, ma'am.
And Beverly 2415 Oak Haven Street in Beaufort. Thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to speak. And I apologize, we were out of town when you had the public events, so we couldn't attend. Really appreciate this, and thank you, Tracy, that was very helpful. So a couple of questions really in terms of the options and what I'm hearing about the certified critical line. In my layman's understanding of a certified critical line, it seems like that means there's some sort of a barrier.
Demarcation.
Well, no, yeah, but that the state or feds won't allow beyond or not. I may be misunderstanding that. How would this certified critical line affect any of the options that you are considering?
And Bill could probably explain this better, but it would essentially mean that we would be filling in that critical area that is a wetland now by the state standard in order to build, to backfill, right? So we would have
they
to.
would allow you to do it, it's just that you would have to do it in a certain way that meets their standards.
Well, at first you'd have to get the mitigation credits to be able to do that, but then you would also probably be challenged more to get the permits to move that project forward, because that critical area is regulated more. And so that's where, one, it becomes more of a regulatory hurdle, but then in addition, you'd have to clean all of that out, all of the pilings, all of the shoaling that's there now. So you've got to probably transport that.
It is the
somewhere else.
most, by far, it is the most environmentally insensitive option.
That was my next question. How would rebuilding the seawall or doing any of these things that you're doing affect the different options? What's the ecological impact of that? Have we considered that? I mean, are we just talking about mitigation? Are we not considering the ecological impact, or?
The ecological impact is determined by the regulatory agencies who will review the permit. So that'll be a joint state and federal So be reviewed by South Carolina Department of Environmental Services, Bureau of Coastal Management, and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
So, could it be then that we select option whichever, and they come back and say, that's not gonna work?
It's possible, so let's say you did select option 3, which is the fill it in, the least environmentally sensitive option. A lot of times for these major permits, of which this will be considered a major activity that we're doing, most times they will require an alternatives analysis for the permit. If we're going to go with that alternative, then we need to show why that is the preferred alternative. It is going to be a harder burden to show because we essentially have to then prove to the state and feds that rebuilding what we have there now in the same footprint to the same dimensions is least least preferred, or is less preferred over filling in the wetland, which is recognized by the state as a natural resource, as a public resource. The state is really big on not restricting anybody from a state-owned resource. So that we would have a huge burden of proof in proving to the regulatory agencies that filling in that volume of wetland was somehow preferred over just driving a pile-supported wharf.
Is cost a factor or not?
The feds in the state, they don't care about the cost. They don't care if it's gonna cost them $5 or 50 million. They care about the environmental ramifications of it. I will tell you, in the same vein as that option will also by far be more expensive.
I mean, it's really about the free flow of water, and this is just the mother of all docks.
Correct.
At the end of the day.
Correct.
So the option 2.
Right.
That brings me to the next question. You guys are great. So, I don't know, when I was in school, I learned that a cylinder is the strongest type of a structure. Again, going back to what you were saying about, octagonal and cylindrical things, would that be something to consider? What about increased intensity of storms as well, which we're experiencing more and more now? How is that gonna affect all this movement of water?
That all comes in with the design phase. The design consultant looks at those parameters, and that's part of what we have started to do with this project. Is we've already started looking at sea level rise projections. We've already started looking at what the effects are on flooding. So yeah, there's a tremendous amount of engineering effort that will come in the preliminary and final design phases.
And regardless of which alternative is chosen, the recommendation is to elevate by 3 feet, right, roughly? So we're at like 6 now, bring it to the 9 range for resiliency.
Right, I understand that, that's in terms of sea level rise, but I learned over the course of all of this how what a strong impact the cruise ships made that I didn't even think about or consider. And I'm guessing you were wondering why there were so many questions. I think the question I would have in terms of the cruise ships or not is because I've heard how the cruise ships constantly impacted undermining that wall with all the water flowing and banging. So the height is not going to make a difference. You're still going to have that free flow of water. And how's that again tied into intensity of storms and so on? And then also that would, I think, maybe answer some people's questions about whether or not to allow cruise ships. I don't think it's just about money. I think it's about what is the impact that will have on the maintenance and the structure of the new system. Rest of it was about amenities, which I agree. I mean, totally can wait till the end. As long as like you had said earlier, Josh, if you build something strong enough that if you want to do something later, it's in place. I think that's a really good way to approach it. Other than that, anything that can be added on can be added on. Y'all doing a great job, and thank you so much. I appreciate it.
If I may, to answer the question about the cruise ships, and Bill, you might be able to answer it. I missed the last couple of meetings, but weren't we talking about dolphins for mooring out a little farther?
That's correct. And, one of the things that I was gonna mention, and surprisingly, I'm really surprised that the cruise ships weren't mentioned more, because I know it has been a point of contention in Beaufort for many, many years, and I'm actually surprised there wasn't a more vocal outcry. It's very similar to being able to go back on and adding on those amenities. We can do the same thing with the cruise ships at a later date. And that might be something that's more preferable to the city, is just to say, look, we want a relieving platform back, but we don't want any specific accommodations to be able to moor big ships against it. Now, where that may be thrown off is, hey, guess what? You remember that $25 million Department of Transportation grant I was just telling you about that might be out there? Yeah, they might tell you, you can have the 25 million. Are you willing to stock a ship up against it? And then that'll be a question that the taxpayers of the city of Beaufort are gonna have to realize. You're gonna have to make that decision. We can take the 25 million, or maybe it's a half-cent sales tax referendum. Which one of those passes? That's up to you all to, But that's one example of how a grant could change small aspects of a project as you get involved. And we may go into it saying, no accommodations for cruise ships. Well, we find grant that says, hey, look, we kind of there's a, this is really good for, commerce, whatever it is, to do this. And so, maybe you go off on a tangent to chase that money.
And I would hope, and I understand that point, and I would hope there would be, if that was the case, then we would be able to identify a grant that didn't require that we do something like that.
Sure.
Just because I think that it's in our best interest to have that flexibility to where we can say, okay, today the residents don't want it, but in 10 years or in 20 years, maybe the residents do want it. And so a dolphin out there, may be a better option. But if we lock ourselves into being required to do something in order for the grant funding, it creates some of the problems that we already find ourselves in. And there's probably no way around it. It's all going to come with strings attached. I just hope that we get to be a little bit choosy on which strings we want to attach.
Me too. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
nothing's free, so.
Yeah.
Anyone else would like to hear it? Yes.
Ben Sellers, 2415 Oak Haven Street. I'm sure one of the costs of engineering during construction will be monitoring the buildings on Bay Street. Is that right? During the driving the piling?
Some of that will probably depend on the final geotechnical analysis and what they're finding. That's a really good question to ask, because that is something for the city to be to be aware of. But what they're talking about is when they start driving piles, right, you would do vibration monitoring. And so maybe, for 2 years, you've got somebody from FNME is out there with a clipboard every day and looking at their accelerometer or whatever they use, just making sure that everything is being done below the frequency. When we did the day dock, when we did all the piles in the day dock, it was loud as all get out downtown. But by the time the pile sunk through the mud to where you were actually putting any energy into the piling, it was so far down below the ground line that there were no upstream problems of it. But that is a good point. That is something that would come out in the final geotech.
Anyone else? Yes, sir. No?
New questions? On Beach 310 Federal Street. Just to talk about some things we just talked about, so we're not gonna get a preliminary cost or anything?
I don't know how. There will be some cost information, but I don't know what order of accuracy it's gonna be in. Let's put it that way. We haven't done any design work. It's really hard to, it's really hard to give you a good number that's anything other than just a systematic guess.
Request for qualifications, that's the first thing, best thing I've heard of. But that's the way to go. You list your best teams and then you negotiate a price. Existing seawall is 36 feet from the promenade. I got a list of questions here. The seawall is generally. And marina, you're suggesting raising the marina seawall.
Mhm.
You're not?
Our project, as decided in this room, ends at the relieving platform. Our team was focused on the relieving platform only.
So what
And
you said a
so
few minutes ago about marina,
that would be like phase 2 or phase 3
Yeah.
of the downtown's Waterfront's 80-year redevelopment plan that doesn't currently exist. But I mean, but it needs to, I mean, you're gonna have to do something to the parking lot in the future. That's a foregone conclusion.
yeah. Uh, So there's gonna be a pretty good transition between the new seawall.
So
And the existing
what
marina
we
wall.
have been talking about is if you, and again, this is going, this could go to a completely different consulting team that is gonna tell you completely different than what I am telling you right now. If we raised it 18 inches now, you'd alleviate all the sunny day flooding and half of the tropical storms you probably get coming through here. We would design it for the adaptive capacity to be able to go back in and get another 3 feet without rebuild, or get another 18 inches. Give you an aggregate of 3 foot of resilience over the next 50 years. Your actual transition from grade to grade is only gonna be about 18 inches. Which, wheelchair needs 30, being 1 on 12, so you're what, 36 feet? You're 36-foot ramp, you're back down to grade.
So the cross section between the proposed wharf and the existing wall. I mean, that was my question, but what I heard you say is we need to replace the existing wall. And that would tie into the new wharf.
Yeah, what I'm saying is most likely from a cost standpoint, so. Number one, we don't have access to get to the existing seawall to really be able to check it and be able to look you guys in the eye and say, oh yeah, sure, it's good for another 100 years. So I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you that, no, don't use that. But instead of paying to have it demolished and completely ripped out of there, just build the new wall right directly behind the old one. And let the old one just deteriorate into the river.
Okay. So the 36-foot line or 36-foot fence that's out there, the distance from promenade is like 7-8 feet from the pavilion footing or pavilion column. So to replace or build a new wall in there, is the pavilion gonna stay?
I mean, I don't see why not. I mean, are you asking, can it be done?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And on the other end, the restroom storage building on the other end, that fence is now right up against the wall of that building.
Should be able to be done too, I would think. Most likely.
My big question for you is, I don't like the platform idea. I mean, the wharf idea.
Okay.
Because 75 years now, they're gonna do it again, and it's gonna all be grown up, hopefully. And we're gonna be tearing out the same thing. I would propose taking that, where the existing seawall is, it's 13 feet of promenade out there right now. 15 feet if you count the column. But its walkable space is 13 feet. So 13 feet. And I like that space, that feels good to people. But if you went to, 7 more feet, went to 20, that would make it an overall 22. I don't like that, but I can live with that. And then bring in the new wall back half the distance of that space. When you're moving in about 15 or 16 feet towards the water, a new wall. And you wouldn't have a 30-foot tall wall, maybe you only have a 15-foot tall wall to build. But you still have a promenade. That's gonna be a wharf. But in 75 years, it wouldn't be such a bad deal to wipe out a wharf. And then with no trees and no seating. And then still have park behind that. That would be my biggest, change in this.
Can I make sure I understand that correctly? Just, so are you saying that instead of putting the new seawall behind the current seawall, you would put it essentially in the middle of that 35-foot promenade, and then this way you have a new seawall, but you have less of a
Height. That's height.
relieving platform, and so then the portion that's backfilled in would be able to house all of your landscape that you don't have to come back and touch in 75 years.
So we're not critical line problem now?
Well, you do have critical line problem.
You got less impact.
You got less impact, and I have worked, I haven't done this in 20 years for critical line people, but I've been to Columbia and appealed these things and won in some cases, especially for a government municipality.
There may be, so you're basically talking a hybrid between options 2 and options 3.
Yeah.
Which is, moving out the old seawall and doing.
So you leave the seawall.
And doing yeah, I see what you're saying, doing a new wall and just moving it all out and making it narrower. Yeah, is there? I don't know how to quantify that at this point. I don't know even how to really begin to say, okay, well, is that gonna be a less expensive option?
Might not be expensive, but it'll only be a one-time expense.
Well, not if you're still gonna have a wharf.
Well, you're still gonna have a wharf, but.
You're just saying in 75 years, you'd only have to rebuild half the wharf, you'd have to rebuild.
If we went out there right
Today,
now and just had to replace the promenade, do it, it's no big deal.
Well, that is all we're replacing.
I'm talking about the walking part promenade,
Oh.
13 feet,
Oh,
which is
yeah.
what I'm saying would be, that's 22, or whatever it ends up being, would be a wharf that would need to be replaced.
Yeah, maybe as this goes into the final design, maybe the consultants look at that and they think that's the best way to solve this. My guess is probably not, because you're still gonna have to have a heck of a lot of fill. If you moved it out another 15 feet, you're still gonna have an endless string of dump trucks rolling through downtown to fill that in, so.
And you're going to be building a wall out in the wet, not in the dry.
So, yeah, it's.
You get the original idea is to put the wall behind the existing wall. That's gonna be a dry operation.
Yeah,
This plan here, it puts the wall out in the water, so now you've got to,
Coffer
need cofferdams to put that wall.
when we started this, and what everybody needs to realize, we started this, we had. I told you guys, we had the whole team got together and we sat down for about 3 hours and we threw it all at the wall. And if we could make it stick even a little bit, we brought it to this committee. And then from there, we pared it down. So we just took out some of the stuff that just was way off the wall. And then we pared it down to what was reasonable within what is pretty standard construction practice, right? Wharf, seawall, we didn't, the hybrid, we didn't go into looking at a lot of, sub solutions and other potential options within inside the options. And there certainly are a heck of a lot of them. And the city's gonna spend about $1 million to have those fleshed out.
Another comment would be, even if you did, what I'm talking about, and you did it on half of the shallow end of the park, by the restrooms coming around there and the shallowest. And you did some modification with a wall, maybe you push it out more. My point is, even if, you got 1,200 feet, and well, if you did a lot of money on 600 feet, and in the future, they only got to place 600 feet of platform. There could be a juggling of wharfs and walls and.
Yeah, and
Instead of 1,200, they only got 600.
And that stuff will flesh itself out really in the final design, because a lot of that's gonna be driven by your geotechnical exploration, because as of now, we haven't taken any geotechnical information inside the park or inside the footprint of the structure, so, that could dictate the placement of the wall, that could dictate the placement of a couple things, so.
my last point is I would recommend an on-site meeting with the committee to walk that line. Maybe with the engineer. Put your hands on, this get demoed. Everything here gonna be gone. And I mean, some of the, I know those renderings you did, brought in were good, but some of them, I mean, they didn't really show 40-foot slab concrete. As far as, you did show, what could happen at the end, and you had an existing, and then you have the option 2, and they all pretty much look the same as far as the promenade. But to do the 40-foot wharf, it's gonna take some serious work about planters and drainage and irrigation. I mean, a lot of that you're gonna have anyway, but walls to support anything growing up on that concrete slab.
So I said, it's a blank slate, it's 40 foot wide, 1,200 foot long, you can do anything you want with it, we can make it look exactly like it looks right now.
Do that.
Or we could make it better.
They can do that. The day we were out there, it was almost magical when we had the presentation out there with the group of people out there reviewing. Yeah, I totally agree.
Let's see.
But, I think that's all if the group would walk out there and take a look, and walk that line, there would be a lot coming out. Like the vacuum may come out, and maybe it could be saved, or part of that building, maybe it all could be saved. But until you kind of walk it, well, I've done that a couple of times, and it's kind of amazing to see, what is coming out.
Most people don't realize how much of that park is over the water,
I know,
and they never did.
so it's gonna be,
The fence helps them realize it now.
The fence helps you realize how much of the park is actually built over 6 feet of dirt over the water. It's very challenging not to crack.
So, Bill, is it correct, based on the conversation I just heard, that the placement of the new seawall is not baked into option number 2? The precise placement.
In my opinion, the plate, if we're talking about the seawall in the back, right, that's behind the face of the platform. Wherever that is now and where we put the new one, whether it's slightly in front of or slightly behind the old one, that's gonna have a minuscule effect overall on the permit, or really on the permit. What I'm talking about is option 3, where you're trying to fill all of that in. That existing seawall, in my opinion, is minuscule. I mean, it's necessary to retain the bank, but I would not get wrapped around the axle about the existing seawall and whether the new seawall is gonna be slightly in front of or slightly behind the old seawall. Because either way, it's gonna cost the same amount of money, whether it's 18 inches behind the existing wall or 18 inches in front of the existing wall, it's gonna cost the same amount of money. There may be a regulatory contention in there, 18 inches behind the existing wall, no regulatory issue. 18 inches in front of the wall, it's gonna show up on the permit, but still, that's minuscule compared to the other 36 feet I'm going out for the relieving platform. So the seawall in general, in terms of the actual earth retaining structure that's land-based of our marine structure, that's almost an afterthought compared to the magnitude of the rest of the project.
Yeah, one thing and trust me, I'm not advocating this at all, but worst case scenario, no funding, can't do the project. Can you lock the relieving platform off and have a park still?
If you're gonna do that, what we would probably
I'm
have
not
to,
advocating.
we
this.
would probably have to buttress the existing wall, because we believe through our structural analysis that we did when we condemned the structure, unfortunately, it appears that the relieving platform was designed to actually buttress that seawall. So if you take the relieving platform out, you could have problems with the existing seawall. Could you buttress the existing seawall if you needed to, because you had to take the relieving platform out? Yes, you could. That would be an option. Okay, we don't have the money to rebuild, but we've found, $10 million to do the demo. Then you could demo it and then spend $1 million or so rehabbing the old wall, presumably, maybe. The other part of that is the old wall is probably 6 feet below the dirt right now too, so.
There's your fill.
I mean, yeah, is it possible? I don't know, maybe,
Is there anything else?
One quick bite.
Yes.
Real quick. Thank you. I don't know your name, but I compliment you for your comments, especially the encouraging all that, the tactile experience of being out there and feel and touch and see what he was talking about. When I asked Bill cost, hope nobody leaves this room thinking that that's the final answer, the asterisk next to cost. I worked at EPA, it was like 100 years ago, and I was expertise in the wetlands area. It's a fluid area. Regulatory agencies, they are not law. It is not effective law, in which case you gotta get Congress to change the law. While regulatory agencies prioritize the most cost-effective ecological solution, they often consider cost effectiveness when choosing between different mitigation strategies. There's no, invite nobody to leave this meeting thinking that cost is not a factor. It's a fluid dynamic environment in the regulatory community. So there you go, thanks.
Okay, I think that concludes the,
Anybody online?
No, nobody's raised their hands.
concludes the, public comment, committee comment, portion of the meeting. So I think we've probably reached the place where we need to decide whether to the committee recommend support engineers going to council with the recommendation. If so, what's our recommendation? And to do this without any further input from engineers, that the assumption would be we've heard everything we're going to hear at this point with respect to phase 2.
Josh, you want to reiterate what you said earlier as a motion?
Yeah, I would move that we as a committee provide a recommendation for option 2 to city council.
Can I ask one more question? I think we just need to know from your standpoint, Powell's kind of 3.4, if you will. Is your recommendation there that no, I mean, everything's possible in the world, but you're kind of the same camp as you are with the seawall option where that's just not the way to go?
I mean, I think the best bang for the buck is gonna be going back in with that wharf. All the discussion that I've had with Duncan O'Quinn, who draws piles for a living, and he builds seawalls for a living. He does both of them. I've been working with him for years. We've had a lot of conversation about this project. And yeah, I mean, option 2, just from labor, from cost, from regulatory. That's really what I think is the preferred option in terms of value.
Josh, before there's a second, did you want to modify about the option 4, ability to come back?
No, I think that's just naturally built into it. I think that we would be able to, because option 4 the only difference was the enhanced amenities. And I think that with option 2, there's still enough flexibility for the amenities to be enhanced down the road. And so I think that if we just provide support for and a recommendation for option 2, then the enhancements to follow as we get more feedback.
I'll second your motion for option 2.
Good feedback on the amenities later as we proceed.
That's right.
Right, good.
I just want to make sure that wasn't
Yeah.
closed.
Is there any discussion on the motion? I have one comment. Something that strikes me as uncomfortable about recommending going forward with option two without having a clue as to what it's going to cost. But we're in a position where do nothing is unacceptable. Do something must happen. And so if you don't know what option two is going to cost, engineers are not in a position, I believe in good faith, not in a position right now to give us an estimate. But I would like that our recommendation reflect that. We're giving an option. Will we have had an opportunity to know what the likely cost implications?
So at this point, we have a motion and a second. And then the discussion is whether or not we call that back and amend it to be reflective of the fact that we are passing this recommendation without the understanding of what the cost is.
Well, I'm not proposing an amendment to the motion. I would support the motion,
Okay.
but I would like to think that our recommendation would go in writing with an explanation or footnote or comment attached to it, which is that under the circumstances, we felt we had no option, no other obligation, no other option at this point than to recommend option number two, recognizing that we simply are not in a position to have any cost information.
We really don't have design information at this point. So we're really going on their qualitative recommendation on design and his qualitative recommendation that we're talking probably a 3 in front of it and not a 100 in front of it. I mean, that's kind of the same thing to me.
Any call question?
Second, all in favor? Aye. Since I was the person that said it, no one objects, I'd be willing to draft a brief statement to go along with the recommendation. Circulated to the committee. All right, we have one other item on the discussion agenda, which I would, has to do with this committee's role, spectrum, grants and funding. I would propose putting that off until we can get some input from your grant person we discussed earlier. Maybe we could get that input at our June meeting.
Yes, I'll see what I can facilitate as far as grant stuff with the rest of our team in the city. I'll see if we can.
What our concern, what my concern was. But what my concern is what role would be appropriate, if any, for this committee to.
Oh, yes. As far as assisting with the grant effort, yes. Yes, we'll make sure we get back to you on that, for sure.
And I would just throw this suggestion out there. Perhaps as we pass along this recommendation and we have now essentially covered the initial charge that was provided to this committee, perhaps in addition to that recommendation, we request that funding be a part of this committee's scope. And then that could be provided by council that we are moving into the phase of grant funding exploration. And we would like the ability to look through that. Maybe that gives us an avenue to meet with your team on what grants exist and how they may fit into the design portion of this. But I think that getting approval from council to expand the scope to include funding at this point would probably be prudent.
Well, You will recall that on March 3, I wrote a letter on behalf of the committee, council, requesting exactly.
But not from this committee, and that's the difference, is I think that this committee needs to provide support for that letter that we would all want to expand the scope. I understand the reasoning behind your letter to council, but it was a letter from you that wasn't approved by the committee prior to being sent to council.
Well, it was not presented at a meeting of this.
Right.
Because what it was, I felt that I had the approval, unanimous approval. Some of it I got in form of emails.
Right, and while that may be true, I think that where we are now is you have that letter, and so maybe now publicly, we look at the letter and say, this is what we're requesting, and then we have a vote to reflect that consensus of support for. I think so.
If you want to make a motion, I'm second it.
Jim
No.
can't make a motion.
But hold on, because that's, even though it's covered under the umbrella, I think, of status of a request to council regarding grants and fundraising, I think that at a minimum, that should be read publicly. And then obviously it would be added to the minutes. But I just want to make sure that we're not running afoul on going ahead and voting on stuff, because that wasn't provided in the packet at all.
This isn't the package.
That is in the packet?
Yes.
Oh, forgive me, I was thinking that was part of the minutes. Okay, so never mind then.
So what's your suggestion?
I would suggest that we vote on whether we support passing this to council or not.
Is there a motion?
Motion
What is your motion, Mr. President?
to submit the letter to council for approval to expand our mandate to include overseeing, being involved in the grant writing process.
I'll second it. All in favor? So, I guess this could either go independently of the report that we're gonna send to councils for the option two, or it could go as a part of that package. Maybe cleaner, make it part of that package, make it part of that package.
Eric, do you have any insight on what would be a better course of action, whether you keep that separate or?
That's a good point. We are asking for,
Well, yeah, because you don't want to mix, if for some reason there is pushback on, well, I guess it can be an amendment. Council can make that call.
Yeah, I would probably leave them separate, because one is a recommendation from us and the other is a call for action on behalf of the council. And so it would probably be easier to keep that separate, probably be more clean. It would be part of the package, but it'd be two separate items.
so this would, the path this would follow would either be through our liaison to the council. That would be to staff. I don't know, opinion.
I would think that it would be through staff and be added to the agenda as an item that we would be able to then vote on. Because I could be the liaison to council to keep them up to speed on what the request is gonna be.
That's right.
But it would need to formally be part of the packet and voted on.
Introduced by staff.
And introduced and have that public review.
So you will take this. Okay, good. Is there any further business, would like to raise before we adjourn? Motion. Favorites, I'm not.